So what if we sort of bring all this together? So again, this idea that I would argue that there's some win-wins. So if we can move towards more natural gas-based energy system or reduce our fossil carbon emissions, so it can be a win for climate, but there's this sort of penalty associated with the methane emissions that occur that sort of degrades that benefit. And currently it seems like it isn't degraded so much that it's worse than coal, but it's a big hit. And so we want to go from a climate perspective, we want to squeeze and reduce those methane emissions. Currently, we sell about $100 billion a year in natural gas in the United States. That's rounded up a little bit. It's not quite that high. And if we're leaking, say, 2 to 4% of that gas to the atmosphere, that's $2 to $4 billion that's sort of on the table to potentially try to fix these leaks. And so if we could use that money as efficiently as possible by sort of targeting these high emitters, there may be, and certainly studies suggest that it would cost much less than $2 to $4 billion to sort of address those leaks. Companies would make more money. We'd reduce the sort of climate impacts. It sounds like a real great win-win situation. So if you're framing this, what this leakage means in Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, we produce about $10 billion worth of gas a year. And if 2 to 4% of that gas is leaking, we're looking at, the loss is on the order of $200 to $400 million a year of lost gas to the atmosphere. So that's real money, and so that means there's real money on the table to try to address this issue. In terms of technologies, sort of sensing technologies, there are definitely companies here in Pittsburgh that are developing. We're partnering with some of those companies that test their devices out in the real world. We're partnering right now with People's Gas, studying methane emissions from the distribution network in Pittsburgh, and are driving around and mapping leaks in Pittsburgh. And as part of that, we're working with a local company, as I said, that's developing a lower cost sensor, and they're interested in what their performance is, and they don't have access to some of this very sophisticated research grade instrumentation. So that's an example of what we're doing here. But I think it's an opportunity for Pennsylvania too to lead in terms of thinking about developing sort of smart regulations that help address the problem. There are several states that are doing that. I think Pennsylvania, we have an opportunity to do that. Certainly thinking about doing it a little bit differently. Can we capture this high emitter aspect and sort of target that? Would be really exciting. There are barriers. Obviously there are barriers. There's contractual barriers. There's other barriers. So it's not completely trivial, but there is an opportunity here, I think, by working together that we could really address this problem.